You go from being serial winners to turning up at a race and not having a chance. That was tough to keep the hearts and minds of the people. You know, if we're lucky, we won 3 races that year that were all opportunistic, but you know, in terms of competing for a championship, no chance. And then suddenly, you know, we were able to start competing and start winning.
You came into Red Bull when it wasn't doing great as a team. And over the next 6 years, you really turned that ship around. From the outside, I mean, people might see that as quite a simple thing, but I was reading about how you'd come to work on your first day of work. The consultants had flown over and fired the previous management team, which always causes a little bit of unease, shall I say. And then they fly out and leave you there. And then from there, you've got 450 people in this team that's kind of dysfunctional. It's not reaching its potential. Yeah. Tell me, because there's a lot of, I always think about going into companies where there's an existing culture and how you unpick it and turn it around. Tell me how you did that at Red Bull.
Well, that first day I arrived, I remember arriving in the office with a secretary that was in tears because her previous boss had been just fired. There was unopened Christmas cards on the desk, a half-drunk cup of coffee. And I think, okay, and a fairly disgruntled workforce that had been through a revolving door of management changes whilst the team had been, owned by Jaguar. So it's like, okay, how am I, what's my game plan here? And my plan was engage with the people, understand what are the issues, listen. Spend the next few months just listening and form your own picture. And so, that's what I did. Over the first couple of months, I spent time walking around the factory, engaging with people, listening. And then the picture started to come clear that there were pockets within the team that there was real capability and talent, but it was just clear that they weren't working collectively. There was this blame culture within the business where the drawing office blamed Aero blamed the wind tunnel, R&D blamed production, the race team were blamed everybody. And there was just this blame culture that there was no accountability or collective responsibility. So it was then a question of, okay, how do we unpick that and how do we create the glue to bring this together? And for me, what was really needed was technical direction. And I thought, well, look, I'm going to go after the best in the business. And that was Adrian Newey. Adrian had an incredible career at Williams and McLaren. And there'd been a couple of years where McLaren hadn't been delivering at its potential, and you could see that business was changing, and it just felt like there was a window of opportunity. So, I made sure I got to meet Adrian, and then I built up a relationship with him and his then wife, and then managed to convince him to come and join the team. And that was a litmus moment, because then suddenly people woke up and said, wow, if Adrian Newey is prepared to come here, he must see something that he believes in. We set off from there, and that then, galvanized the technical career, because Adrian's the most single-minded, engineer I've ever come across. That galvanize the team, because it was, well, if Adrian says that's the direction we're going, technically that's the way we're going. And it then put a sense of purpose into the design office, and that enabled me to attract more talent to supplement what was there, to weed out the few bits that needed tidying up. But the core basis of the team hadn't really changed from what had been underachieving at Jaguar. We just put in clear leadership into a structure and started to instill a culture of, it's not just about having the 7th biggest budget, which means you're going to finish 7th. It's a question of, okay, what can we do? How can we push the boundaries? How can we be more innovative? How can we take the fight to the guys at the front? Because we're not prepared to settle, being seventh. We want to win. What is the fastest route to getting into a winning position?
How did the Red Bull team innovate versus other incumbents?
Well, I think we grabbed the regulation. So initially it was about building and making sure that we got the right tools. So from 2005, when Red Bull came into the sport, for the first 4 years was about recruiting Adrian, getting some other key people around him, making sure that we got the right simulation tools, and our wind tunnel was delivering reliable results. And then a big regulation change came for the 2009 season, which felt like a clean sheet of paper for this group to really grab hold of. And it was a big regulation change at the time. And we got it right, or mainly right, because there was contention with the governing body about something called a double diffuser, which certain teams had and others didn't, but it got caught up in the politics between the governing body and the commercial rights holder and the teams who were all arguing for a bigger share. And we sort of got caught in the crossfire of that, when it was really about Ferrari and the FIA and had nothing to do with Red Bull. But we come up with a competitive car. And then suddenly, we were able to start competing and start winning. And we were making mistakes, but we were fast, we were challenging, we were winning races. And we lost out on that championship at the end of the year to Jenson Button and Ross Brawn, because we'd had a weak start due to this regulation discrepancy. But then from 2010, we took that momentum into that year. And we were still a little rough around the edges, but we managed to, basically polish ourselves enough that we came out with both championships at the end of 2010. 11, then we went on and was a totally dominant year. And then a big regulation came for 12. We had to adopt to that and won it at the final race in Brazil against Fernando Alonso. And then stability into 2013, saw another dominant year for the team. And then obviously it was a complete reset, because when 2014 came along, all of the engine regulations changed to this V6 hybrid. And we were completely out of bed. The engine that we had was nowhere near the competitiveness of certainly that Mercedes had come up with. And suddenly you go from being serial winners to turning up at a race and not having a chance of success. And that was tough to keep the hearts and minds of the people, having been used to winning, to suddenly turning up and, if we're lucky, we won 3 races that year that were all opportunistic. But, in terms of competing for a championship, no chance.
How do you do that? How do you keep their hearts and minds motivated, focused?
I think you identify again the area that's causing the weakness and look to address it. And focus on the bits that you can control. So the engine we couldn't control. That was from a third party, supplier. We could put pressure on them. We could try and assist them with tools that we had. But all we could do was ensure that we made the best chassis that we could possibly make, that we got the best drivers and we got the best out of them. And so, races that weren't sensitive to power, we could challenge and win those, whether it was a Monaco or it was a Budapest type, circuit, and then look to address the weakness. And it took us until 2019, and again a big change from one engine supplier to another manufacturer, to Honda, to suddenly have that ability to start challenging for victories and start to build a championship challenge.
I didn't realize that in Formula One there were so many changes with engines and regulations so often.
It's changing all the time. Sometimes even in the year,
really,
changes are introduced, and we've seen that this year, and it's not uncommon for clarifications or technical directives, sometimes hidden behind the grounds of safety, to be introduced. And it's about how you adapt to those changes.
And that's a question of culture, right?
It is. It's, you can push against it, but at a certain point you've got to accept it and get on with it and think, okay, how can we turn shit into fertilizer. At the end of the day, and you've got to embrace the change, and you've got to go with it.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.